I had never seen anything like that for a live show. My name is Ernest Green, and I record as Washed Out. I finished my last record, Mr. Mellow, probably late last year. Just in the last month, we will have done shows in 15 different countries. Oftentimes, it's festival situations where we have very little time to set up and get ready for the show. It felt really important to have something that we would have night after night. In a moment's notice, we can get it up and running, and knew that we wanted to travel with our own rig. So I was reading about a few of the boards that have smaller footprints that we could fly with, and kind of pitched a few of these ideas to Pat, and he had heard of the LV1 and thought it would be a good fit. And then I used a ton of Waves plugins for the production of the actual record. It just made that transition into the live show that much easier, just using a lot of the same stuff. Most of what we're doing on stage is playing samples from the actual stems from the record. The samples and the plugins allow us to kind of get way closer to the album sound than we ever have before, which I think that was the other big thing. Pat lives in LA, I live in Atlanta, and the band flew out to LA to do rehearsals, pre-production. And we were able to rent a space early on and basically run through the entire set that we had been rehearsing as a band. And as it tracks live, we recorded, the entire set basically. Then took that the next day back to Pat's studio and were able to just go song by song, track by track, and really dial in the things that, I was passionate about hearing. That sort of thing we've never had the opportunity to do before. At best, maybe we've had like a day or two of pre-production, just scrambling to get a basic show together. This whole experience, it feels more like a studio session, really, sitting in and tweaking just the tiniest little detail. Again, has been super important for like pulling off the sound of the record. For me, the focus was on the vocal sound and then the drums. I'm sort of a reluctant singer, and I really like processing my voice. Just the natural sound just feels too strange for me. But it's a big part of the Washed Out sound over the years. One of the plugins that defined the vocal sound on the album was the Real ADT. I can't think of anything that on the outboard hardware side that does something similar. It feels pretty unique and, again, sounds really, really close to the way the album vocal sounds.
So yeah, we use the Real ADT quite a bit. It's just doing this kind of random kind of waveform as far as the modulation goes. I find that that was kind of basically the exact setting he used on the record. So.
Yeah.
The way it's kind of set up is I have VCA for all the vocal effects that I can bring in and kind of use more or less of. And it's basically there's kind of a saved level for each one for every song. So there's a kind of a balance already.
The album is quite diverse as far as the genres in play, and I think there's a lot of different drum sounds happening. So it was really important to be able to affect the kit from song to song in dramatic ways. There are two major kind of lanes as far as the songs in the new record go, I think. It's more kind of mid to slower tempo, kind of hip-hop influenced stuff, which generally has just a really fat kick drum that's pretty prominent in the mix. And then there's stuff that's a little bit more influenced by like disco and house music, a little bit faster tempos.
What I wanted to do was be able to process the drum groups in different ways. Well, as far as the drum cat goes, this is a sampler that's kind of a larger sampler that he plays, and we just kind of needed varying kind of smoothing of some of those samples. So a lot of times I'll use the Pwig child, which is obviously like a Fairchild, to kind of get a light, sort of just touch it with compression a little bit, and it's, you know, going through all that, so it kind of sounds a little more like hardware. It's usually a lot of combinations of all these. This one uses a lot of different plugins because it's kind of first track. And I use just mild EQ from song to song as well. The NLS, which is really great, obviously. So I'm just trying to make those sampled drums sound like a natural, you know, sort of analog path. He asked me early on, you know, can you make it sound like what, French house, where it's a little more pumping with the compression and almost like some cassette tape almost sounds, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So there's that, and then sometimes from song to song, I'll just use just a tiny bit of compression. And then the L2. Some of the samples are very in your face. You kind of have to round them off a little bit, and it sounds a little more natural. So,
much like a lot of electronic music, you know, a common thing is like a low-pass filter sweep, something like that. So there are a few moments where we sort of emulate that, and it's happening over the entire master bus mix, which feels quite extreme. And it's funny seeing people out in the audience kind of like they're not sure what's happening for a second. There's also a bit of flange that makes it even crazier sounding.
yeah.
But I had never seen anything like that for a live show. Again, it felt like something you would do in the studio, but you know, I've never had the tools to do anything approaching that. So,
Well, and I guess in the past, as a front of house engineer, would you bring a flanger and a stereo low-pass filter on tour for one song?
yeah.
Maybe if you have a big budget, you know, like, but in this case, it's just so easy. I bring it in, engage the flanger, bring it back up, and it kind of just gets really psychedelic, you know. Works out really well. Freaks people out.
I'm very passionate about this show. I feel like it's the best sounding tour we've done to date. The fact that it sounds so close to the record is really amazing, and it would be impossible without a lot of these plugins. The LV1 has been such an important part of putting this show together and getting a live show that sounds so close to the record was super important to us. And yeah, I feel like the sky's the limit.